Thank you. Thank you, President Diver. He already violated the first rule of comedy, which is you never let the funniest guy go first. What's going to hold the rest of you here, right? The show's over. And I want to thank all of you in the class of 2012 for inviting me here, because I have been dreaming about this day for 23 years. Well, before you applaud, I should say, to be more accurate, the dream is about my own graduation. I have it about once a month, like clockwork. The same dream, the same horrible, terrifying dream. And in this nightmare, oh, you're going to have it. It's graduation day. I'm just like you. I'm sitting here on the lawn. I have the robe. I'm a little hungover. I'm with my friends. I look out. I can see my parents with their cameras. They're waiting for me to graduate. And as I'm sitting there, probably during the person who spoke for my commencement address, it hits me. I signed up for a course, and I never went to it. And in this nightmare, it's always a weird course, like prose stylistics. And I sit there thinking, why did I sign up for prose stylistics? And who is the professor? And wait a minute, do I have enough credits to graduate? Now, this is the point in the dream where you do one of those things where you physically pull yourself out of the dream into the waking state, and I lie there in my bed in Brooklyn, New York, literally saying in my head, did I graduate? Did I graduate from Reed? I did. I did graduate from Reed, didn't I? It's sort of the Reedy version of there's no place like home. You should probably mount your diploma right next to your bed, I'm just saying. And speaking of people not graduating, the registrar handed me this very long list. Apparently about 200 of you did not return books to the library. Aronson, Adam, it's going to take a long time. I just gave you that so you could dream about it for 23 years. It is amazing to be here, and it is amazing to see you all. I talk on the radio for a living, but I don't normally see my audience. I don't know if you know how radio works, because I actually don't know how it works either, the technical part of it. But the actual recording of it works. We are in tiny, windowless rooms. They're dark. We usually have to just imagine our audience. You just see your reflection in glass, and you all seem much younger than I imagined the NPR audience. It's often recorded late at night or very early in the morning, which explains why the signature NPR sound is very mellow. It's like we're broadcasting from the womb. But that's not what I try to do. In every job, there is this danger of sounding like everybody else, sounding just like your colleagues. And I fight against this every day, although I do have my mellow moments. But my goal when I do a report is to just talk like a regular person. Like I'm sitting around the Yukon Tav with my friends. Yeah, as I did 2 nights ago, karaoke night. I know, I probably saw you there. Now, this sounds like the world's easiest thing, right? You know, sounding like yourself. We all talk every day. All you have to do, Rob, is just turn on your microphone and talk like yourself. But in fact, this has been the hardest thing that I've ever done, and the most rewarding, figuring out how, in my career, on the radio, to actually sound like myself. Now, I want to talk about this today because this is crucial for all of you as Reed College graduates. Because we've been lucky we went to a school that encouraged us. I mean, they accepted us. There was very few boundaries you could push here, and that encouraged us to be who we wanted. But I'm just going to warn you, you may suspect this, it's a little harder to pull this off in the real world. For instance, at NPR, when I started reporting, you would rarely say the word I on the air. We would do this little thing where we'd say, and this reporter asked the mayor a question. And this reporter was amazed at the answer. Part of this was NPR style, but part of it was also a fear. When you find work out there, you will find there are so many other voices. They're the voices of your colleagues who probably have more experience and know more than you do. I'm sure they do. There is the loud institutional voice of your company or your organization that says, do it how we've always done it. But the loudest voice is the voice inside your head. And this is huge when you first graduate, the voice that says, keep quiet, get along, just sound like everyone else. But it doesn't have to be this way for your whole career. And 10 years, pretty much to the day after I started saying this reporter did this and this reporter did that, I was doing an NPR report from my shower, actually naked on the air. And it was a report on the history of Dr. Bronner's Magic Soap Shampoo. All right, hippies in the crowd know what I'm talking about here. And if you listen to this report, you can actually hear me squeal a little bit when the Dr. Bronner's very minty soap hits the sensitive bits. Now that's a report that screams out to the world, yes, I went to Reed College. Now, I'm not saying here you should strive to be naked in your work. Although this being Portland, I know that is a valid career choice, and I'm not judging. I'm just saying you need to find the way in your life to show a little bit of skin, to find a way to get yourself, your personality into what you do, to look at your work and your career and be able to say, when you finish at the end of the day, this is something that only I can do. Like, this is me. This is what I'm about. But I'll tell you, 25 years, it took me a long time to figure this out. And I just want to briefly go through the sort of 3 stages I had to go through in order to come all the way back around and sound exactly like I do now. The first thing I had to learn was, before I could sound like myself, I had to actually listen to myself. And this is the obligatory dream section of the graduation speech, so if you need to visit the bathrooms, this would be your time. But I'm not going to tell you to go live your dreams, because someone told that to me, and I sat there, and I thought, I don't have a dream. Is that wrong? Although, technically, I think I had so many dreams, and they change so often, it's the sort of equivalent of not having a dream. And I realized that my profession, journalism, is partially responsible for this, so I'm going to apologize now, because we love telling this story. We love telling the story of the dream. And I'll let you in on a secret. You probably noticed this. Whenever you write a profile of somebody who is a huge success or is going to jail, it doesn't matter. The mythic story is the same. You always start at the end of the story, and then you follow the line back, so it looks like it all makes sense, right? So, you sit someone down for an interview, and you say, when did you first dream of being an opera singer, or a Nobel Prize-winning economist, or the worst inside trader of all time? And, because I did dream of that. And then you say, well, what obstacles did you have to overcome? How did you triumph over those obstacles? And reporters, they're no different than every other storyteller through time. Like, we want to hear the hero's journey in our own life, the epic myth. But what never makes it into these stories, into the hero's journey, are all the dreams that didn't work out. There's just not time in the stories, right? To say every dead end, every lost year. You never hear the part of the legend where the hero just wants to chill for the summer, hang out in Portland, right? The mighty king who just wants to figure some stuff out, get his head straight. Now, that happens, but every storyteller edits that out for time. And it's easy to make this mistake with your own life. When people usually ask me, they're like, how'd you get into radio? I'm like, I did college radio at Reed College, and bing, bang, boom, there you go. I'm at the network now. But this leads out some very important information. So I did start in radio at Reed College, absolutely, KRRC, in the basement of Doyle, which I hear is going all internet, which is funny because it's not like it went anywhere when we were actually broadcasting, but sure. That's going to work out well. But the problem was with this epic story I've told about myself is that just because I did radio in the middle of the night, this was not my dream. I wasn't even particularly good at it. I did a mix show with my friend Aaron where we mixed 50s doo-wop and rap, just back and forth. It was excruciating. And if the tapes ever got out, I would not have a radio career. But I had a dream for a while. I was going to be a doctor. My dream, yeah, all right. Somebody's got to do it. But my dream met organic chemistry. And by the way, if I had become a doctor, here's how the hero's journey would go. He went to organic chemistry. He tried valiantly. He failed. But he tried again. And then he failed again. So then I was going to be a neuroscientist. I couldn't get my act together. But here's the thing, and this is where it comes back to listening to yourself. I should have known. I should have known that this was not my path. Because on the plane to come here, I reread my thesis for the first time in 23 years. Yeah. I was writing about rat psychology. I was a psych major. And rereading it was so sad. And it's not because I'm sure it was fine, but no, it wasn't fine. But there was not a single line in there that I could recognize. I mean, I felt like as a student I was excited, I was curious about the world, and I reread this thesis, and it could have been written by anybody. There was no joy in it. There was no thrill of discovery. In fact, I'm going to read one line. You will forgive me because I don't know how to pronounce one of the words in it, and I don't know what it means. Yeah. Okay, here we go. All right. Maybe I'll do it. Should I do it like the radio? The level of behavior deviation from the median appears to reach an asymptote. Yeah, I wrote that. Asymptote. But if I had been listening to myself, I would have known that this did not sound like me. So I needed to get moving on this very unheroic journey I was living. So number two, second phase I had to go through, before I could sound like myself, I had to listen to others. After graduation, I was waiting tables downtown at Huber's, Spanish coffee place. You should bring your parents there tonight. It's excellent. And almost on a whim, I walked into the community radio station here, KBOO, KBOO, which, by the way, in the rest of the country where you say you started a place called KBOO, they giggle. And I just said, I'd like to volunteer. I didn't have dreams. I didn't know what I would do. I wanted to volunteer. And they started me off on the most basic of radio tasks, editing tape, actual tape. And this is what changed my life, walking in and being given a mundane task. Because they sat me down at an old reel-to-reel tape recorder, which, oddly enough, is about the exact size of this podium. And they're dinner plate-sized reels of quarter-inch audio tape. I don't know if you've seen these. They put this right here. And they hand me a razor blade, an actual free razor blade, a little grease pencil, and they say, start cutting. Literally cutting the tape with a razor blade and then reassembling it with little bits of adhesive. This is how we did things back then. And so you would have a story there and you go, cut it, edit it. I know, but I felt like I had a skill, you know? I was doing something. And my job was, they would bring me a news report that was 5 minutes, 6 minutes, 7 minutes, and they would say, we need you to get a minute out, 2 minutes out, 3 minutes out. We don't care how you do it, you just need to get this time out. And so you start with the ums and the ahs, like that's the easy part, right? Cut, cut, cut. Then maybe a few breaths, take out the long pauses. You could have filled buckets of tape with likes and you knows, and I mean, those go. And then you have to cut whole sentences, and then you cut scenes, and then you start to cut people, entire people disappear from the story. The deputy mayor, gone. Like, he's out of there. And it's such a miraculous feeling, especially when you think about being a Reedy, and think about all those conferences you were in, and all those moments where you're sitting back there going, cut, cut, snip, snip, stop talking, now stop talking. This is the craft I was learning. And I should say that all the people I know who have ended up finding their voice have ended up doing a very mundane task like this, because something strange starts happening when you start doing things, especially doing things with your hands, like it was. You just start to figure out the basics of a craft, and it gets inside of you. And I was just doing it because I thought it was fun, but what I was actually learning was the architecture of storytelling, when you think about it, which is, what can you cut out? What in this world is important and what is not important? What are the load-bearing walls of a story? You leave those, cut the windows, you take down the wall between the kitchen and the living room. There was only one problem. Like, this would be a great place to end, but there's one problem. When I actually made it on the air with these stories, I sounded like a robot. I had learned the craft, but I couldn't deviate from the rules. Like, I was still editing myself. There was one more step I had to go through. Before I could sound like myself, I had to sound like someone else. I'm going to get in trouble for this part. I know for your whole life people have said, be yourself. I'm telling you, not yet. Don't do it yet. You've had your 4 years. So for me, the road to myself involved some incredibly bad imitations. And I wish I could play for you some of my radio work, my early radio work, but graduation speeches aren't really multimedia yet, so maybe I can give you a taste of what I sounded like. Okay. First time on the air. This is the KBOO Evening News. I'm Robert Smith. I think I was trying to do a vague British accent. There's a whole thing at the BBC. I had listened to way too much of the BBC, and they call it three-level delivery. The three-level delivery. Except I was just doing one level, and I'm not British. But here's the scary thing. I didn't know I was doing it. I was 22 years old, and I was scared. But as embarrassing as this is, I needed to feel like I knew what I was doing. I needed to take somebody who clearly knew how to do it, the BBC, and kind of do something similar. And it didn't end there. I went through many different phases. There was a time when I would tape radio on little cassettes on the air, and then I would write it out by hand just to feel what it was like to have those words come out of me. My first paying gig was in Salt Lake City, and before I went to the job interview, I taped the news director, the guy who was going to hire me, when he was on the air. And I basically memorized his style. All right, let's see if I can do this one. He did like everything in one breath, so it was like this. It's All Things Considered on FM 90, I'm Robert Smith. You hear the breath? That's his breath. I loved that breath. All Things Considered on FM 90. Like, I was like, that's bold. Like, you just do it. Like, I don't know, it got me the job. But if I admired someone, I would incorporate a little bit of their style. So I had my deadpan, Ira Glass, This American Life moments. I had my boisterous Robert Krulwich swagger moments. If they ever heard me on local radio doing this or recognized themselves, they were kind enough not to point it out when I got to the network. But once again, this is exactly what I needed. I thought like I was learning radio through this whole thing, but what I was learning is I was learning confidence. Day by day, bad imitation by bad imitation. I was learning that I can do this. And then one day, you're looking at your work, and you're thinking, oh, should I try this? Should I try a little bit of that? Should I try this? And then you just make the scariest decision of all. You have the confidence to say, you know what? I'm going to do it like me. I'm going to do it the way I think it should sound. And I can actually remember the first moment when I was really, truly myself on the air. This was a piece on, a very hard-hitting piece, mind you, on the trend of deep frying turkeys for Thanksgiving. I don't know if you remember a few years ago, there were a lot of houses that burned down. So everybody was all anti-deep frying turkeys. But I was like, no, this is awesome. Have you tasted it? And I was incredibly passionate about this subject. Following around, I went to Home Depot, I got the fryer, I followed around the guy frying it, I ate it on the air. Like, I was vividly describing each detail, the bubbling sounds of the oil, you know, the NPR thing, blah, 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 blah. I was so excited about this topic. And unlike my thesis, you could actually tell on the air that I cared. I'm an excitable guy. It should come through on the air. But after I recorded it, I sent it to Washington, D.C., and I freaked out. I sent a note to the producer. I said, hey, I went a little over the top here. But I can fix it. I can retrack it. I can do it. But here's the weird thing. To them, it didn't sound like it was over the top. That's just what it sounded like to me. I'd spent so many years keeping my voice down. For them, it sounded like someone who trusted himself enough to say, I like this, and you will like this too. 10 years of talking on the radio, and finally, I could recognize me on the air. Now, this is a great moment, and I wish it for all of you. The feeling that no one else could have done this thing the way I did it. I'm not saying better, I'm not saying worse, I'm just saying you, something that sounds like you. And perhaps you've already tasted a little bit of it in your thesis, and if so, I'm sure you're hooked. It's the best feeling in the world. And one of the great joys you will find, as I've found, is your friends here, watching them go into their crafts and their professions. They usually wear clothes to work, my friends anyway. They have found their own ways to gain confidence from doing mundane tasks. They have their own people that they imitate, the best doctors, the best lawyers, the best scientists, the best academics. They imitated them. And when you hear your friends really sound like themselves with a confidence in the profession they do, it's the best feeling in the world. Now, I'll have to say some of my friends figured this out a lot quicker than I did. Some are still looking. This is not easy work, but this is actually the one part of the hero's journey that I was making fun of. This is the part that I think is true to life. Heroes always return home. They return back to the place they started. They've changed, but they're still themselves. President Diver mentioned the Odyssey. You may remember, I didn't, I had to look it up, but Odysseus takes 10 years to get back home. And when he does, he's disguised himself. He's disguised as a beggar. And nobody suspects anything except his old nurse. And she starts to wash his feet. And she says, you know, you seem familiar. You resemble my old master. She says, I recognize your figure. I recognize your voice. The hero returns, and the hero sounds like himself. Reed College, class of 2012, I'll be listening for you.